I'm Pastor TJ McCabe, and it's in this video that we hope to inspire your heart, your mind, and your spirit throughout the difficulty of your week and help bring you back to the grace of God. What comes to mind when I say the word renew? A quick Google search defines renewal as the restarting of something after an interruption from the event. Now, this definition works most certainly with our general understanding of our faith life. In our communion confessions, we often say that we turned away from God and that our love failed. Meaning when we decided to go a different way than that which God would have us to go, and when we stopped loving others, loving ourselves, and loving God, we chose to end or sever our time with God. And so we need a moment of renewal in those moments. A moment where we come back to God, admit our failures, and strive, promise, even work towards staying with God and God's way and God's plan and God's future until we find ourselves lost again. But when I originally thought about the word renewal, in my initial preparation, I thought about the need to renew things like our driver's licenses or our car registrations or insurance. Really, anything that has an expiration date on it. Now, when I think of our faith life, I don't really believe that any of us have an exact expiration date that's stamped on our hearts or on our souls or on the bottoms of our feet. No. Renewal is something that we need for our lives and that we need for our faith. This second definition for us to fit in our biblical definition of renew is a bit more difficult. In Isaiah 40:30, it reads, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles, and they will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." I think many of us look for this type of renewal from God, expecting the over-the-top strengthening. When we get run down, when we're tired, maybe we long to move or to do things like when we were younger. Sometimes it feels as if what is going to be required to give us the strength that we hope for and that we pray for is for God to give us strength like Samson. To receive what we are hoping for, we need it to be over the top. Now, I believe in miracles. And while I believe if God wanted to do that, that he could do that, I just don't think it would be a practical piece of advice for me to suggest that we're going to receive this type of bodily, physical renewal from God. Another biblical passage is in Romans 12:2. It reads, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And again, this is the first definition that we read. It seems as if our renewal is of us not doing something or not being with something and us coming back to us, starting it over, having a new start. It's about us realizing that we have succumbed to the temptations of the world and finding ourselves spiritually lost. We need to be renewed. And I think the key here is in that spirituality. Now, I say spirituality, but I think we need to consider a more holistic approach to our strength that we receive from God. To the need for strength, to the need for us to have ambitions, to have a drive to do something. Consider the prophet Elijah in the story from 1 Kings. Despite his very successful work for God, he silenced all of the false prophets. Now Elijah seems depressed, as if there was never going to be a moment that was better for this work for him to do. And so he believed that he had done his best work and that it would be all downhill from that moment. So it would be better for him to die. And so Elijah lays under the tree and begs to God, "Allow me to die. Take me, God, in this moment." But God isn't through with Elijah just yet. And so he has an angel come to him, and the angel comes to Elijah and says, "Get up, Elijah, eat." Elijah is spiritually tired. His spiritual depression has made its way into his mental outlook on life, and he would be more content if he just died. He's physically exhausted. His spiritual sickness has carried on over into a type of mental struggle or illness. And it likely even is weighing on his physical health as well. And so when the angel comes to Elijah, he says, "Get up and eat." God is strengthening Elijah holistically. He's doing it physically, he's doing it mentally, and he's doing it spiritually. But this is a moment of great renewal for Elijah. And it stands as a great example for ourselves as well. Because God starts to pull Elijah closer and closer back to God as he works through his mental, his physical, and even his spiritual well-being. There was this great wind in the story. And Elijah's looking for it. He's trying to find it, but that wind maybe is pushing him away, pushing him in another way, but God isn't in the wind. And then there's this great fire, and the heat causes Elijah to struggle, and he's looking for God in the fire, but God's not in the fire. But then there, in silence, in the tiniest of whispers, Elijah finds God. You see, sometimes we look for God in the greatness of the great and powerful events, in the over-the-top things, in what we expect from a Hollywood movie. And as we search and we look, God isn't anywhere to be found. But in that searching, as the flames or the heat from the flames move us in a different direction, as the winds push us in places that we would have never considered to look, we move closer and closer to God. And why does God whisper to Elijah? He whispers to Elijah because Elijah looked for God in the wind and in the fire, and he didn't find God, but he moved closer and closer. And now Elijah is so close to God that God only needs to whisper. That whisper, Elijah doesn't require anything more but a soft whisper. Can you feel it? For us to be renewed like Elijah's strength, like Elijah's purpose, like Elijah's spirit, it took a physical, mental, and a spiritual approach from God. And if we go back to our second definition of the word renew, the idea of having a date or an expiration, needing to renew ourselves with God, we have to think anywhere in our lives where one door closes and we don't know where or what is in store for us behind the next door or what door to even open, that means that we require renewal in that moment. Possibly in a new year, we can search for a new door, a new way, and we can take time to seek for renewal for our lives, spiritually, mentally, and physically. But if there's anything that is in any type of an expiration for our lives, it's this idea that God is not compatible with sin. We cannot have sin in our hearts and worship God at the same time. We cannot accept sin to be in our lives and allow it to live there and rule its day and faithfully follow God's laws at the same time. It's as if our spirits say it is not compatible with sin. It's null and void to have sin in our lives. Not acceptable to have sin and God in the same space. And this is why we need renewal. Now, communion is such a unique way of seeking to renew ourselves with Christ because it certainly is a spiritual event. We are communing with the saints and praying with God, asking for God to hold our spirits in His care, to guide us and to lead us in His ways. And it's a mental healing as well. For in confession, we examine our lives, we confess our wrongdoings, and if we hold on to those missteps, if we hold on to our guilt, then it becomes this mental anguish of the things that we've done in our lives time and time again. We hold on to our regrets, and holding on to those types of feelings, that mental anguish can lead to physical issues as well as mental ones. And like the angels that speak of Elijah, get up and eat. In communion, we're told to get up and eat. God physically feeds us the body of Christ, the blood of Christ. As we move into 2024, and I know I'm hoping to personally take a more holistic approach to my health as well, the Bible tells us that our bodies are temples. But what is it that we are actually putting into our bodies? If we're doing fast food constantly, that's going to be a problem. If we're only eating pastas and breads, that's going to be a problem. But what if we're considering our bodies as a temple and putting what it is that we're supposed to put into our bodies? And what if we're taking care of our bodies and working out? What if we're concerned about what's in our heads and what it is that we're consuming in television and in books and in the news? And what if we consider the stresses of our lives and how those mental stresses weigh on us more than we realize? And then there's our spirituality. We have to also consider, how is it with my soul? What is it that my spirit is feeling? Am I close to God or am I far away from God? Now, whether you're looking for renewal because you feel as if you are further from God than you were at one other point in time in your life, or whether you're searching for God in all the wrong places, maybe you recognize the sin that's in your life that's keeping you from God spiritually and mentally and physically. And in that, I pray that we might take steps to find renewal that strengthens our bodies, that strengthens our minds, and that strengthens our spirits, our hearts. Let me take this time to invite you to worship with us here at Greenwood United Methodist Church. If you need reminded about God's love, or you want some company or guidance in the searching for God's renewal in your life, we would love to support you in that and to get to know you better. So we worship here at Walton Avenue Sunday mornings at 9:30 a.m. here in Altoona. And if you've enjoyed this Green Grace moment, I'd like to ask you to like, to share this post, maybe even make a comment in the comment section below. Because I pray that this might be our first step together in finding ourselves renewed in God's Spirit. And so as we close out this Green Grace moment, remember that God is with you, and we won't want to miss it. There's one tiny edit in there, and that is it.